All right, in this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to do one-point perspective shapes. One-point perspective is a system of using receding lines to a vanishing point to create the illusion of depth and space. So this is the beginning of one-point perspective. This is where we start and then we build on from here. So you're going to need a piece of paper, and you are also going to need a ruler and a pencil. Now it's essential that the pencil has an eraser because we're going to be doing some erasing. Now if you can't find your ruler, that's okay. You can create a straight edge with just a piece of paper. So this is just a piece of notebook paper that I folded in half and then half again, and it creates a straight edge to use for drawing straight lines. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put a vanishing point in this near the center of our page. We don't have to measure it. I'm going to start out with something simple like a square. So somewhere on the paper, I want you to draw a square. Now I'm not making it too big because I want to have room for more shapes. We're going to do 7 shapes for this. All right, so the first step to drawing this square and making it have depth or a space to make it look like a cube is to be somehow connected to my vanishing point. And that somehow is through these corners. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to align one of my corners to my vanishing point with my ruler and draw a line. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with my next point. Just slide my ruler over, making sure it's always connected to my vanishing point. That ruler is always aligned, and then do my next one. Now here we have this lonely corner over here that we haven't attached. And if I attached it, it would go through my shape. So therefore I'm not going to draw it. I want to make it look like my shape is a solid shape and not transparent. So if I wanted it to look transparent, then I would draw it. So right now we have this cube that goes on forever until the vanishing point where we can't see it anymore. So instead of having one that goes on forever, we're going to cut it off. So the next step is to use parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines are lines that never cross. They're going in the same exact direction. So I'm going to align my ruler to the top of my square, and then I'm just going to slide it. Now you decide how far you slide it. How far you slide it kind of changes how big that cube is going to be. And I'm going to align it now to the side, and I'm going to slide it until it hits that kind of intersection right there. All right, so this is the side of my box, and you don't have to shade. I just like to because I feel like it makes it look better. And this is the top of my box. Okay, now all this stuff is extra, so I'm going to erase it. That's where that eraser is essential. Now once you get good at it, you don't necessarily have to draw the line all the way to the vanishing point. As long as the ruler is aligned to the vanishing point, you should be good. All right, so we're going to try another one. Let's try a different shape, but something that has similar qualities. So for instance, I could do a triangle. All right, so here I have a triangle. And just like my square, it has points. It just has fewer points. So I'm going to use the same rules that I use on my square on my triangle. I'm going to connect my points to my vanishing point. Now, if it goes through the shape, you're not going to draw it. So depending on how you drew your triangle, you may only connect 2 points. Maybe the third one, it will go through the shape. It all depends on what it looks like and where it is in relation to the vanishing point. So just like before, I'm going to use my parallel lines to cut off my triangle. So I'm going to align my ruler to the side. I'm going to slide it and cut it. So that side is really just kind of a sliver. I don't see a whole lot of that side, but I do see part of it. Now I'm going to align my ruler to the other side of my triangle, slide it, and cut it. Again, parallel lines are essential for making these shapes look right. So make sure you are using parallel lines whenever you cut off. All right. So those are the rules for our straight edge shapes. But what happens whenever we have a shape that's something like a circle? Suddenly we don't have corners to connect to our vanishing point, so things change a little bit. So instead of corners, we have to find our edges. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to align my ruler to my vanishing point, and then I'm just going to slowly rotate it until it gets to the very outer edge of my circle and draw a line. So instead of a corner, we're using the far edge of our circle. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Draw it, slide it. There we go. All right, so our cylinder right now goes on forever. So let's talk about cutting it off. So cutting it off is a little bit different because the edge here is curved. We can't just cut it off straight. That won't look right. So whatever this edge looks like that's in this kind of triangle area is what we're going to use to cut it off. It's just going to be a little bit smaller because it's closer to the vanishing point. So that curved edge right here, I'm going to mimic down here to cut it off. All right, I'm going to try one more rounded shape just to reiterate. Now it's not completely round. It has a little bloop thing here. That's fine. It still has rounded edges. So I'm going to connect that now to my vanishing point. I'm just going to rotate my paper for easier convenience here. I can reach better. So just like my circle, I'm going to use the outside edges. I'm going to align my ruler. I'm going to rotate it until it gets to the very outside edge. And now I'm going to do the same thing over here. All right, so cutting off is not going to be just like this clean like half circle. Instead, I need to look at kind of what this looks like and mimic that. All right, so I have 4 shapes, and they're fairly simple. We're going to build on our knowledge here, and now we're going to draw a shape that combines both points and curves. And so the first shape that comes to my mind is, in fact, a heart. So I'm going to draw a heart. Now, depending on how you draw your heart, it may look a little bit different when you connect it to the vanishing point. Every view is a little bit different. So I'm drawing mine kind of like diagonal, just kind of floating there. All right, so let's start with the point. The point is the easiest. So that is just like my square and my triangle. It's a point. I'm going to connect it to my vanishing point. Nothing difficult about that. Now, I have 2 rounded edges here. So I'm going to focus on the front one first because that's the easiest and that's the most familiar. So that outside edge, I connected to my vanishing point. But I cannot ignore this guy. He kind of juts out. I'm going to see 3D qualities of him. So I'm going to use my ruler. I'm going to align it, and then I'm going to also align it to the outside edge of that second part of my heart. Now, I'm going to stop drawing it as soon as it hits the other part of my heart. But that part is seen. That's like the other 3D part of that side of my heart, okay? Now, as far as cutting it off, I'm just going to look at this shape and mimic that. Now, I don't cut off this because it's just so small. This part of the heart is covering where it would be cut off. So I'm just going to leave it like that. All right, so we're going to add 2 more shapes to this. Now we're going to get a little bit more complicated, a little bit tricky with our shapes here. Just because the more practice we get, the more advanced we can get. So we're going to do a shape that has something cut out, and then we're going to do a letter. All right, so what I want you to do is draw some sort of shape. I'm going going to draw something that's kind of like a triangle, but a little bit different. And then I'm also going to cut out a similar shape in the inside. So we're getting kind of fancy here. So here we have a part of it that's a little bit convex, and that's something that's a little bit different than what we've had. And then we also have a shape that's hollow. We're going to see 3D qualities inside here. So we're building on our knowledge here. Now I'm going to start on the outside of my shape first and focus on that because that's familiar. We already know the rules on that, and then we'll talk about the inside. So I'm going to connect my points to my vanishing point, because just like my square and my triangle, I have points, and so that's fairly easy. All right, so this is a straight line, so I can easily cut that off using a parallel line. All right, so this is like a curved line. So here I have to go kind of how I cut off here. I have to use that kind of shape to cut off, or that kind of line to cut off my shape. Okay, so that's a little bit different. All right, so we have the outside done. Let's talk about the inside. Well, just like my rules before, if a point can be connected to the vanishing point without going through the shape, I connect it. However, as soon as I hit another part of my shape, I stop drawing it. So right there, just that simple line going to the vanishing point has created the illusion of this like 3D-ness inside. Now I'm not going to cut it off because I feel like this part is going to be covering up where it would be cut off. I'm just shading it just to kind of give the illusion that it's inside there, making it a little bit more 3D. All right, so that's 6 shapes. Let's do one more, which is going to be a letter. Now you can decide what letter you want to do. Whatever letter you decide, I want it to be a block letter, and it can be stylized. It can also be a bubble letter. I like block letters because it has points, and therefore it's a little bit easier for me to connect to my vanishing point. But if you want to do a bubble letter with rounded edges, feel free. So I am just drawing a block A that is kind of stylized. So notice how, this is really just shapes put together. So here's kind of a rectangle, here's a rectangle, and then a little rectangle. So our letters are really kind of shapes put together, if they're block anyway. All right, so after you get your letter, it seems a little bit complicated because there's so many nooks and crannies to a letter. But if we kind of take a deep breath and remember our rules, it shouldn't be too complicated. So I'm going to connect my points to my vanishing point, and I'm going to start with the outside of my shape. Now this is an interior corner, but it's still a corner, and it doesn't go through my shape, so I'm still going to connect it. Now this guy is right aligned to the letter, so I'm not actually going to draw it. This guy goes through my shape, this guy goes through my shape, so I'm not going to draw anything on the top part of my A. This part is the interior, so I'm just going to kind of leave it for right now. I'm going to focus on the bottom part. All right, so cutting off is using those parallel lines. So even though I have a lot of lines to cut off, a lot of sections to cut off, if I remember in my brain that I use parallel lines, it should be okay. So these two are parallel. So my next part is right here. I'm going to align my ruler and slide it and draw a line. Okay, so my next section is up here. Align it, slide it, draw it. Okay, and then the last part is this guy right here. Align it, slide it, draw it. All right, so the last part of my A is the interior, and I don't want to ignore the interior. Got a lot to erase there. So there might be a little bit, well, only a slight bit of the interior, like my pencil's dull, but you can't really see it, but this would be the 3D part of the inside. Really just shading it in will actually do the job for that interior. All right, so there's your 1-point perspective shapes. Try it and send it my way.